Yo, what up, y'all? Justin Gay, Seeds and Zanzidu. Unstacking. This has been something that I've been wanting to put up for you guys now for a little bit of time. I'm unstacking these microgreen trays, so I'm going to show you exactly what it is. This is actually more so for unstacking for the cooler time of the year. Here in Southern California, once again, I'm in 9B, 10A. This is what I've learned that I've had to do when it comes to growing microgreens in the winter. Unstacking your microgreens at the right time, dude, is crucial when you're growing outdoors, when you're not growing in that controlled of an environment like what we have here. Even though we are indoors, it still gets cold in here. The ambient temperature stayed down. We can warm things up in here, but nevertheless, there's still a couple rules that I feel as though I have to kind of abide in order for me to get a good crop. And they all start off basically with the unstacking process. Like I said, especially in the cooler times. During the warmer times, you really don't have to worry about this as much. You kind of have to look at it, you know, from season to season. There's characteristics that are similar, but at the same time, it's not exactly the same. This is all of our cilantro. Right now, what I'm looking for with the most important part of unstacking that I'm looking for at this very moment is the length of the shoots, right? You see how long those guys are? Now this cilantro tray actually was growing maybe a little bit too long. This is what it's kind of looking like. That normally happens with any kind of seed that you end up soaking on the top tray, right? Because when I go down to the next tray, watch what happens. You have a little bit of that, but not as much, right? What I want is those sprouts to actually be going down into the dirt. I want them to have actually been able to find their soil, right? So now that they're going to, begin to grow correctly. Check this run. So this cilantro, it could be better. More than likely, what it looks like is that it was a little bit too long when it got put in the trays. It should be fine here. This right here is more or less what I'm looking for. See how most of the shoots are facing down. They're finding the soil. That's kind of what we're looking for right there. Now again, in the case of this cilantro, I'm not really overly concerned. I'm pretty certain that everything's gonna find its way back in. If you do get concerned with this, what you can do, one, is actually go get a little bit more compost or whatever growing medium that you're using, and just kind of sprinkle that on top. And what that'll do is actually help redirect those sprouts directly into the soil. It doesn't really take much. It's like a light dusting of them. I've shown it in another video. You wanna make sure that they get hydrated, especially if that water is actually dried out, which can happen, even though it's cooler. It happens, man, especially out here. We can get into the single digits in terms of our humidity. So things can get very dry, therefore our trays will evaporate very fast, even if they're still in the stack, or I should say fast enough to when we now unstack them that they're dry. So you definitely want to make sure that you get moisture on those trays. When it is cold, however, I find that it's better to allow your watering source to heat up a little bit, before you actually do put water on your microgreen trays. That's if you can. I mean, if you can't do it, then fine, go ahead and water them in. But if you can hold off for a couple hours until the sun or whatever heats up your hose or whatever watering source you have, if it's necessary, I would definitely do that. Just because everything right now is cold, I want my microgreens to be growing immediately. Just to kind of get a jump. So that's something that I definitely think about when it comes to unstacking my microgreens. Again, watering, the very first water is as far as I'm concerned, the most important water of any stage of microgreen. I mean, it's all crucial, but the very first one, yeah. If you hold off for too long, you'll see that throughout their development and then ultimately have a lighter harvest more than likely. Dude, I'm running out of space out here, man. And I gotta get rid of all of those. The trays accidentally got seeded out on the wrong day, so now everything's ready. Just about everything's ready. And I don't have any place to actually bale some of these other greens too, so I probably will end up utilizing some of our outdoor racks outside there. I mean, it looks like a lot up there, but for the most part, we'll be fine. This time of the year, I can still leave radish outside, and I can actually leave pea out there as well, and everything, like as you can see, like right here, everything actually looks pretty good. As it gets cooler, we'll start bringing in the pea more so. That's why they're actually already on the rolling carts. Radish, man, I can keep the radish out there till temps get really cool, but eventually it goes back inside as well. Yeah, like I was saying, we're gonna have plenty of space. We'll take all these radish outside, and then the sunflower, they're gonna actually go on that rack anyway. And the pea, I can probably leave them stacked up for another day until we actually do make some room with these racks right here, because tomorrow we actually are going to be loading stuff up for our market. So we'll be able to make a lot more room. But look at that, it's like I need more space again. Those sunflower won't be ready until tomorrow, so we'll leave those guys on. In the summertime, I can actually pull those out, and more than likely they'll be perfect, they'll be fine because of the ambient temperatures. But right now, nah. Right now, I don't even mess with it. I just leave them in here in the stack for a little bit longer, and then we'll take them out. Like I said, they'll be ready by tomorrow. Now all I have really up there to worry about is my broccoli shoots. They probably will do okay outside. I mean, we are gonna get down to 49 tonight. The radish can actually take that. The broccoli probably could take that as well. But what I'm gonna end up doing is actually just going ahead and putting them up on the top shelf of my rack here. We'll water them and go ahead and just put them on the top shelf of the rack and just let them hang out there until tomorrow. And as soon as we make more room here, put them on those racks. Kind of what I was getting at. This side of the trays, for whatever reason, didn't look like it was properly hydrated. So those seeds need to actually be covered again for a couple more days. Even though the majority of these seeds have already sprouted, I'm gonna go ahead and still put a cover on these guys. And to be honest with you, by tomorrow, those seeds should be up and ready to rock and roll. This is gonna minimize me getting any mold in these trays. The shortest amount of time that these need to stay in the stack, the better, especially after they've sprouted. Another thing I do as well is after I've watered in the greens, for the most part, I like to bring them back inside indoors, and I'll let them stay indoors for a couple days before actually I move them out. What this does is allow your microgreens to begin to stretch. That's what we want them to do. And during the winter or the cooler times, they're gonna stretch less. So right now, especially this time, this exact time of year, I can still bring in a lot of microgreens, allow them to stretch, and then put them back outside, and then allow them to start greening up. That's kind of the idea. I mean, they do green up inside the grow room as well. You're not gonna make it look like that in there by any means. So you definitely want to make sure that they get their own light. Another really cool thing about this too is, like I kind of mentioned in other videos, is that the cold air actually will preserve your microgreen trays for a lot longer. In fact, with the sunflower, what I've been doing is starting them off like I'm going to do right now. I've been starting them off indoors, leaving them in there pretty much with the lights off for, I don't know, 1-2 days, as long as I can allow that. If it's warm enough, I allow that to happen. We've been in right now, the lows have kind of been in, the lows have been in the 50s, but we've gotten as high as the 60s and been hanging out a lot in the 80s, but now we're starting to get down to the 70s and the 40s at night. So I'm not exactly sure on how long that's going to be able to last. For the most part, what I can do is leave them in there without light. They actually look pretty much that tall by their 5th day. On their 5th day, I then take the sunflower out, and then it just allows them to open up and then pop all their sunflower shells off, and we're pretty much good to go. These guys right now are at their 8th day, so they look awesome. I can actually harvest them now. Now the plan is actually to take out, we'll be taking these guys out to market. We'll have these guys already rock and roll. While our harvesting trays, the plan is to actually hold them over until next week. This is a trick that I've kind of been doing, but what I've been doing as opposed to ever putting them inside is just leaving them outside pretty much 24/7, letting that cold air hit them, and what they do is just grow extremely slow. So now I don't have to worry about that third leaf popping in and changing the flavor profile. Again, this is the cool part of this time of year, man. This is like why this time of year is actually probably still my favorite time to grow microgreens. It's like things are just way easier. You can kind of play around with things a lot more as opposed to just putting things in and out. I mean, I can preserve stuff now. I can use nature to help as opposed to putting things in my cooler and all that kind of stuff. When I'm pulling the microgreens out of the trays, like my brassicas, my radish and all that kind of stuff, during the winter or cooler times of the year, I want them to be looking like that. See how they're standing up? Everything's kind of up right now as opposed to looking like that. where things still need to be germinated, right? So good, bad. During the summer, this tray can still play because the ambient temperatures are going to be warm enough to actually keep those microgreens, actually keep those sprouting, right? To get them to the size that we need them to relatively fast, to be honest with you. Although this tray will actually catch up to this tray in not that long of time. I do this trick in the summer as well, but definitely you need to do this in the winter, and that is simply restacking that tray. So make sure you water first. You want to water it, and then after that, go ahead and put another tray on top of it. This actually helps with room, with space as well, especially when you're in need of a lot of space like I am right now. But I'll leave that on there probably for a day, maybe two at most. That one probably, I don't know, that one's kind of in the middle. But I'll leave it on there like that, and that tray will be perfectly fine. I won't even be able to tell the difference when it comes time to actually harvest. So that's awesome. That's pretty much it for unstacking. Very important step when it comes to growing your microgreens. You know, if you unstack them now at the wrong time, you're probably gonna end up paying for it a little bit. At least I find that I pay for it a little bit if I don't take a couple precautions to make sure that everything's gonna germinate right. That's pretty much what it all comes down to, is just a pretty strong, solid germination. An even, strong, solid germination is what we're looking for here. And this is how I go about getting it this time of year as things start to get cooler. As things get into the cold, it's just me pretty much doing more of that, giving my trays a little bit more time to actually develop. It's just stuff like that. So ultimately, the earliest we ever seed microgreens, at least in years past, has been on Monday. Again, that's where all these got seeded out on. Normally, at this time of year, we're only seeding out our harvesting trays on Monday, but somehow or another, everything got seeded out. So that's why there's a bit of a space. That's really not big of a deal. I just don't feel like going back and forth right now. Kind of goes to show one day makes a huge difference in the development of these greens, man. So especially this time of year. You know, if you guys are finding any of my content valuable, go ahead and let your friends know as well. Subscriptions really help out around here. Thanks a lot. Oh, and don't forget to comment, man. I love hearing what it is that you guys got to say, and your tips or tricks, they're awesome. Peace.